Today's notes, starting off this chapter, should be review. We talked about it a bit last chapter, and you also talked about it last year with Mrs. Diggs. So we're going to be putting equations into slope-intercept form and graphing it and writing the equations. So first of all, here is the um, schedule for the chapter. You want to make sure you're aware that Friday, September 30th is the last day to get any missing stuff turned in. It's also the day that your extra credit and your test corrections are due. Thursday, October 6th, we will be taking an inspect test, which is through Pivot. We practice that a little bit in class. This is the test that's replacing Acuity, so think of it as taking Acuity. And then your test for the chapter will be Friday, October 7th. Okay, so onto our notes page. We're going to be using the equation y equals mx plus b because that is our slope-intercept form equation. Now, when they came up with the equation y equals mx plus b, I don't know where they got m and b, but I like to think of it as m, which we know is our slope. Our slope is always in front of x. So m I think of as move. It tells us how to move our points. And then b I think of as begin. B is the y-intercept, and it'll tell us where to begin when we start graphing. So again, always remember your slope is always the number from your x, the y-intercept, the b is the number that's always without a variable. So first example, they want us to write an equation in slope-intercept form for a line that has a slope of 3/4, so I know m is 3/4, and a y-intercept of -2, so b equals -2. So I'm using the equation y equals mx plus b because they asked for it in slope-intercept form. So I just plug in my numbers. M is 3/4 and b is -2. So this is my equation. And then when I go to graph it, you begin with the y-intercept. So the y-intercept is where did it hit the y-axis. So I need to look at the y-axis, find -2, make a dot. So you always start on the y-axis. And then your slope is 3/4. So remember that slope is also rise over run. So this tells us we're going to rise 3 from the dot we just made, and we're going to run 4. Now, the way that I always make my slope, my denominator will always be positive, so you should always be going to the right for that. If the denominator were negative, then you'd go to the left. So since it was positive, we went to the right towards the positives. And then I just need 2 dots because I know it's going to be linear. So your line should look like that. For example 2, the equation 3x plus 2y equals 6 is in what's called standard form. We'll talk about that another day in more detail. The standard form is whenever you have your x and your y all on one side. We want to turn the equation into slope-intercept form, then graph it. So we want the equation to look like y equals mx plus b, which means we need to get y by itself. So if y is ever not already by itself, please get it by itself. So I have this equation 3x plus 2y equals 6, and I'm trying to get y by itself. So I'm going to subtract the 3x over to get 2y equals 6 and 3x are not like terms, so I'm going to write them separately. And I want it to look like y equals mx plus b, so always write the variable first. Negative 3x, and that was a positive 6, so plus 6. Then I still need to get rid of this 2. Right now it's being multiplied, so I'm going to divide everything by 2. To get y equals negative 3 over 2x plus 3. Now, a couple of things I want to comment on about the slope here. One, I always put, like if my fraction is negative, I always put it with my numerator. If you had a negative on the numerator and a negative on the denominator, so if you were dividing by a -2, then it would simplify to be positive 3 over positive 2. But if there's only one negative sign, just put it with the numerator. It will make things a little easier. And then this is an improper fraction. In algebra, you want to leave it as an improper fraction. So we're going to keep that as negative 3 over 2. So when I go to graph it, I know my slope is negative 3 over 2 and my y-intercept is 3. So I'm going to begin with the b. So begin on the y-axis, which was 3. Your slope was negative 3 over 2, so from this point I'm going to go down 3, right 2. You can make another point if you want, but it is not necessary. So it would look like that. Okay, we have two more examples on the next page. For example 3 and 4, they already give us an equation. We just need to graph it. So I need to figure out what is my slope and my y-intercept. Well, the slope is always the number in front of your x. So if I look here, there is no x, which means your slope is going to be 0. And we typically like to have our slope written as a fraction, so let's just write that as 0 over 1. Then your y-intercept is going to be negative 3. So begin at negative 3. And it says we're not going to rise any, but we're going to run 1. So it should look like a straight line going through 3. Now this does not mean that it is no solution. It just means it has a slope of 0. So it's not going up any, it's not going down any, it's just going straight across. Example 4 is very similar. We still need to get y by itself, so divide both sides by 2 to get y equals 1/2. So I need to figure out your slope and your y-intercept. Your slope, again, is the number in front of your x. There is no x, so the slope is 0, and your y-intercept is 1/2. So when you find 1/2 on the y-axis, just do your best to estimate it. I think 1/2 would be about here. And remember, write your slope as a fraction, so it's 0 over 1, which means I'm not going up or down any, I'm just going to run 1. So again, it should be a straight line going through those points. And again, this is a function, so it's not no solution, it's just your slope is 0, and that's okay. If you have any questions, please let me know.